We are live. Let's get ready to podcast.
Fire it up.
Welcome back to another live and amplified Indie Fusion podcast. I'm your host, Tom Quad. We are back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest joining us. We have Arily Michele. How's it going today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's got a little cold, but you know, it's all good. It's January, so I guess I'd expect nothing less, right?
Yeah, I kind of like the cold, actually.
Fair. I grew up in Chicago and I came to Texas for a reason, and it was to get away from all that. So.
Say less. Yeah, understood.
Fair enough. So you're based in Nashville. How's everything in Nashville?
Yep, I'm based in Nashville. It's been pretty calm these last few days because of the holidays. Most people are out of town. It's probably going to start picking back up once it gets warmer, though. Right. Musicians. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say you got CRS and CMA Fest. That's all coming up here in the next 4 to 5 months, so it'll be hectic.
Right now, it's musicians' hibernation season, so everybody's kind of hunkered down in their home studios writing new material and whatnot.
Right. Fair enough. So how long have you been in Nashville?
I've lived here for 2.5 years.
Nice. Was it always kind of the goal to get to Nashville, or was it?
Well, I mostly moved to Nashville to pursue music professionally. And like it took a little bit of figuring out what exactly that meant for me, because Nashville, I mean, it's a huge music industry hub, and there are so many different paths that you can take once you move to Nashville. So I've spent a bit of time figuring that out, but mostly I've just been absorbing everything that Nashville has to offer in terms of learning about the industry and just connecting with other musicians who are on the same path as you, things like that.
Fair. And so you said, we were talking a little bit offline that you're originally from North Carolina, but you came to Nashville from Colorado.
That's
Was this
correct.
all part of like your musical journey? I guess is kind of the best way to word it, or?
So it's more part of my like origin story, I guess. Like I'm originally from North Carolina, spent most of my life growing up around the Southeast. Mm-hmm. And then once I finished college, I moved out to Denver, and that was where my music career really took off. Like I started a band while I was out there. I also started my solo project during the pandemic while I was still living in Denver. Mm. So those are kind of the two like key component. That's the most abridged way I can think to describe my origin story, if you will, is because I've moved around to so many different places that when and I think most people who are like me and they were also military brats growing up, they can attest to the fact that once somebody asks you, where are you from? You kind of have a little bit of an existential crisis.
Right. It's one of those things where it's like, well, I was born here. Other than that, that's all I got for you.
Yeah. Where are you from? How much time do you have?
Right. So it was when you were living in the Southeast, that's kind of what got you into music, or where you started exploring music, or?
I mean, I've always been musically inclined. Like I started singing when I was like 2. I started tinkering around with my mom's like Casio piano when I was like 5. I was in band in middle school. I was in chorus in high school. Started writing when I was like 8. Started writing songs. Nice. I started producing when I was like 14. So it's kind of like scattered about. I've always been musically inclined. But like I said, living in Colorado was where I really felt like I had the freedom to finally start pursuing that. Mm-hmm. 'Cause I felt like up until that point, I was really just learning the things that I needed to know. Yeah. I studied music in school. And there were things that I needed to learn in order to kind of take my musical abilities to the next level.
Fair. Very fair. Do you feel like that move out to Colorado was kind of your opportunity to be who you want to be? Because obviously growing up in the Southeast and being near family, I'm assuming, did you go to school in the Southeast as well?
Yes.
Kind of breaking away from that, I kind of feel like maybe that was your opportunity to find out who you were, even as a person or a musician. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that is 100% accurate. Like I like to put it as like I was born in North Carolina and reborn in Colorado,
Fair.
if that makes sense. And like I think kind of removing myself from like old friends and removing myself from like my family a little bit kind of allowed myself to de-influence from them, if
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the people that you grew up around, they have an influence on you. But for me, I think like moving away from all of that and kind of carving my own path as like
Yeah.
way far away from everybody,
Hmm.
it really gave me um the time and the space to truly connect with not just who I was at that point in time, but who I wanted to be.
Hmm.
And like, I mean, the thing that I kept circling back to is like, I would just want to be a musician.
Yeah. Yeah. I relate to that on so many levels because where I grew up, it was very similar, where it was like your friends and your family had a lot of influence on you, and you start to think, okay, this is the kind of person that I am. And then you get an opportunity to go far away,
Mm-hmm.
like very far away. And it's like, oh, wait, no, that's not exactly who I am. Like, there's elements of these things that I brought in or that I've learned for the last 22 years, 24 years, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
But like, and for me specifically, it was moving out to New Mexico. So very similar to you, Chicago to New
Yeah.
Mexico. And it's just kind of like, that was kind of the opportunity to figure out
Mm-hmm.
who I really was away from the influence of my friends and family and just kind of really figure out who I am. So,
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very liberating experience for
yeah,
sure. It can be kind like it was kind of messy for me because I was like, 23 and
yeah,
broke and
fair.
Denver is expensive. But it's like I find myself feeling like really nostalgic for that era of my life very often because it was the world was my oyster, as like
Mhm.
cliche as that sounds. I had all of um this time and this space to figure out like, oh, this is what I like to do. This is like who I am, things like that.
Mhm. Absolutely, 100% agree. So kind of looking at that time in your life, you said that was kind of your rebirth. Um, is that kind of where you found your voice as a musician, or do you feel like you came to Denver with a pretty good understanding of who you were musically?
I think it definitely also shaped my voice musically because I was, like I mentioned before, I was in a band when I was living in Denver.
Hmm.
And I think working with other musicians and having that kind of collaborative space, I was able to kind of work through like things that I feel like make me stand out, kind of bridging together all the little tiny pieces in my story and then figuring out how to incorporate those into my musical persona, if you will. And like one of the big things that I was encouraged to do that I probably wouldn't have otherwise if I hadn't lived out in
Hmm.
Colorado and hadn't been in that band was like I had studied opera in college and we were just like sound checking during a rehearsal and I was just kind of messing around. I the our drummer was messing with the levels on the PA and I just started like singing an aria just randomly while he was trying to get the levels right on my voice. And he was like, "Why don't you do that on stage?" And I was like, I don't know. I just feel like that's really pretentious and annoying. And he was like, "No, it's cool. You should do it." And so that was something that I did a lot on stage. It was like something that I kind of shied away from because it's like, oh yeah, I studied opera and it's just this like really um, very rigid form of art. It feels like almost, and it's not very accessible compared to like pop music, and so I kind of shied away from it because it's so niche and it's
Hmm.
so almost bizarre. But since like leaning into that, I've had a lot of fun kind of incorporating elements of like opera and classical music into what I do musically. I feel like it gives, I mean, it's a part of my story. And I think that, I should just embrace all these like little unique aspects
Hmm.
of my story instead of trying to shy away from them because I think it adds like an interesting flavor
Hmm.
to what I do. It makes it unique. So,
100%. 100%. So, in one of your YouTube videos that I was watching before we jumped on here, you said you make music for people that enjoy going to the cemetery for fun.
yeah, that's one of the things that if there's an old cemetery around, I am probably going to hang out in it at
Fair,
least at some point.
fair. Was that something that started? Is that kind of like the something that you've always, I don't want to say you always been into, but like, because that's such a weird way to word it, but like, where does that mindset kind of come from? Is that something that's always been there, or is that something that you kind of found in Denver?
It's something that has always been there, but it's something that I only felt the freedom to pursue as an adult. Like I remember as a kid driving by all these really like all of these cemeteries,
Yeah.
like, and some of them were really old because, you know, the Southeast is just such an old
Hmm.
region. And just seeing all of these like graves from generations past and thinking like, you know, it must be really sad that nobody visits these graves anymore because their families are long gone.
Yeah.
Um, just this like esoteric sort of melancholy about it that I found so strangely beautiful. And there was actually a cemetery, a really old cemetery located close to my sorority house in Tallahassee. And that's that. I think that was where that started, like me actually going
Hmm.
into these cemeteries. But it's, I mean, I've also been to like Père Lachaise
Hmm.
in France. And there's a Spring Hill Cemetery down the road from me is also very, very old. Like I think it's from like the 1700s or something.
Hmm.
There's just something so like beautiful about it, I think. Um, and I think I try to capture that in my songwriting where I said something about this the other day. It is like to me, I think they're so beautiful because they're a testament to the fact that like you are loved.
Hmm.
Somebody cares enough to put a stone marking your grave.
Yeah.
As morbid as it is, and it is pretty morbid, I think it's very, it kind of reminds me of the line of like, what is grief if not love persevering?
Hmm.
Just that level of like this human sentimentality and human like traditions that I feel so drawn to. So me saying that is like me trying to signal to other people like if you're weird like this, you'll probably really get my music. You'll probably really like it.
Fair, fair, fair.
Yeah,
You said the Magic City name of Tallahassee. How'd you enjoy it? I'm guessing you went to FSU.
I did. Yes.
Uh, did you get a chance to partake in the music scene there?
I did not. And this is why like my move to Denver was like so crucial to me, just like finally dipping my toes into the music scene. I was like, I had tried starting bands for the longest time and
Mhm.
then I kind of just gave up on it for a while. In Tallahassee, I felt like I had to be so rigid and like, I'm a classical music student and I'm learning classical music. But
Fair.
so I unfortunately I didn't get to mess around in the music scene there. I kind of regret it, honestly. I wish I
Fair.
had.
Fair. What years were you in Tallahassee?
I was there from 2014 to 2018.
Okay. So we had a little bit of an overlap. I lived there from 2017 to 2019.
Okay.
Yeah. It's I didn't like it. That's just me being honest.
Yeah.
I wasn't a huge fan of it because um for a lot of reasons. It was very expensive and it was just yeah. But
Yeah.
the music scene was cool. They had a lot of cool infrastructure there. So I was just kind of curious if you had a chance to
Yeah.
play around in the scene at all.
I feel like college town. I mean, Tallahassee's not really a college town, but it kind of is.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's, I mean, this the state capital, so.
Yeah.
But I feel like college towns in general tend to have pretty burgeoning music scenes because you've got people who are young
Yeah.
and they probably have a lot of creativity and they probably have a lot of frustrations that they want to get out. And
Right.
music is a great outlet for those things. Same with like visual arts and stuff like
Mhm.
that too.
Yeah.
But I hear you. I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts. You mentioned like you're not a huge fan of Florida, and
Yeah.
I lived there for 7 years, and that was 7 years too many.
Yeah. Like it's one of those things where it's like my dad lives there, so it's like I go there to go visit him because we don't get to see each other that often, especially since my mom passed. So it's just kind of like one
Yeah.
of those things where I'll go every once in a while, but he keeps trying to get me to move there, and it's like, Dad, I really don't like Florida. You're trying to get me to move here, and if I knew you were going to stay here, I would actually consider it. But the fact is, he travels so much. So I'd
Hmm.
be living in a state that I don't like with nobody, no real family there. And it's just
Yeah.
kind of like that's not a win-win situation. So
Yeah. It's living in Florida was tough for me because I mean, even though I grew up in the Southeast, I find myself like the older I get, the less tolerable I find really hot, humid
Yeah.
weather, but I can tolerate it when I get a break from it. And in Florida, you don't really get
Get
a
it.
break from it.
No.
And like fall is my favorite season. You don't really get much of fall in
Yeah.
Florida. So that first year that we moved there, I was a miserable wretch.
Yeah.
I was complaining constantly.
Right. Well,
There's no
and
leaves changing here. It's too hot.
right. Well, and it's one of those, well, growing up, especially on the East Coast, you're used to that. Like growing up in Chicago, we had the leaves changing and like our
Yeah.
fall was actually fall. And
Yeah.
then I moved to Tallahassee and I don't know, just something about it, like the humidity there just kills me. Like it never burns off. Like in the winter, it's still humid as all hell. And it's like, does this never just like go away?
It's very
Like,
oppressive.
yeah. So, and that's Tallahassee. Like down south, the humidity goes away every once in a while. Every
Yeah.
once in a while. But Tallahassee, it does not
It's
ever
just
go.
like a swamp up
Yeah.
there. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
It is. Oh, so then after school, that's when you ended up going out to Denver?
Yeah. Yeah. That was me being like, I'm finally like, like I had to stay in Florida because I had to graduate high school, and then I went to in-state school because it was much cheaper. So I had to
Yep.
stay until I graduated college. And like a senior year, I was like, all right, where am I going? And I took a spring break trip to Colorado, and I fell in love with the place. So I
Nice.
decided to move out there.
That's always the funny thing is like everybody's trying to take spring break to Florida, and everybody in Florida is like, I'm going anywhere else.
I went hiking in the snow in March because
Right.
and it was awesome. I loved it.
Right. That's awesome. I dig it. So then what was kind of the tipping point to move to Nashville? Like obviously Denver seems like it was a very good thing for you. What was kind of like the tipping point to move out to Nashville?
Yeah. So me and my husband, we got married, and coming out of the tail end of the pandemic, one of our main goals was being able to purchase a house.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't really feasible in Denver.
Fair.
Also, rents were getting really expensive. I think that market might have cooled down a little bit now,
No, it
but
hasn't. It really
yeah.
hasn't.
And I mean, I operative word being little there, because I mean it's crazy, and we were kind of just bouncing around ideas of where to go next, and we kept coming back to Nashville because it was a more affordable music industry hub.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it was a little bit closer to both of our families. Like his family was living in Iowa at the time, and my family lives in Florida still. And now his family lives in Tennessee as well.
Nice.
So there are a few things, but we kept just like coming back to Nashville because it just kind of checked all of the boxes that we were looking for. It was affordable to live. We did end up buying a house. It's like a really cheap, crappy fixer-upper, but it's our cheap, crappy fixer-upper.
Nice.
And yeah, like the music scene was obviously what drew us out. He's a musician as well. He plays bass in my band.
Nice. Nice. And so where are you kind of at currently with your music? I know you released an album earlier, well, not earlier this year, but last year. Like, I don't know how much earlier this year it could be, but you released an album last year. What was that process kind of like? Was that fully recorded in Nashville?
Yeah. Yeah, it was. I started the demoing process while I was still living in Denver. A lot of those songs I wrote while I was living in Denver.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of them actually I wrote before I moved out to Denver. And it was about a 2-year long process because I really wanted to. I had put out an album before, but I'd worked with a producer, and had them doing the recording and the mixing and the mastering and all that for me. And I don't have any regrets about it, but I do wish that I would have spent a little bit more time figuring out what I wanted that album to sound like, because what was produced from that project was very good, but it didn't really resonate with me. So I wanted to, in order to learn from that mistake, I really wanted to take my time with the next record and figure out exactly what I wanted it to sound like. And I spent a lot of time just listening to music and picking out what I liked about it and trying to figure out how to incorporate those elements into my own production. And I spent a lot of time on the demoing phase because I wanted to be very deliberate about it.
Yeah.
And so the actual recording process didn't take very long. It took maybe like 2 months tops. Mixing only took about a month total. So after that demoing phase was finished, the actual recording was like,
Easy.
I had already played the parts a million times over. It was
Right.
just getting higher quality recordings of them. So it went pretty smoothly.
Fair. Now, were these songs like as you were going through the demoing phase and kind of like the fine tuning, writing, recording, and all that stuff? Were you playing those out at shows before you started recording, or?
Yeah, I was. And it's kind of funny because there's probably some videos of me floating around playing to backing tracks that I made with the demos.
Nice.
Where it still had like the original drum plugins that I was using that were not very, I mean, they're not bad, but they didn't match the
Yeah.
vibe that I was going for. So it sounded very different. But yeah, I was playing those around for a while. Some of them I had even played with my band, and then I ended up deciding to record them as part of my solo project.
Nice, nice, nice. And so the name of the album is Highway Hypnosis,
Yep.
which with all the traveling you do, like that title makes like all the sense in the world. So
Yeah.
I know the struggle of highway hypnosis all too well. I just
Oh
drove back
yeah.
from Chicago, so it's like after
Oof.
about 10 hours, it was like, yeah, I'm good. So
How long of a drive is that?
the way up it was about 14 and a half. The way down, because I had to actually take my dad to O'Hare,
Mm-hmm.
it was about 16. And I also had to go a little bit of a different way because I was trying to outmaneuver some weather. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yep, for the most part. But no,
Yeah.
so what was when you started working on this, did you know it was going to be a full album, or was that the intent to write a full album, or were you just kind of working on music at that point?
For a while I was just working on music. I'm an album person. I
Mhm.
like to sit down and listen to albums. That's how I digest music. And I kind of don't really care if people think that's outdated. I don't think
Yep.
it is. So usually when I'm working on music, I am gearing towards an album. Highway Hypnosis ended up becoming more of a concept album as I was writing the songs because I was also doing a lot of reflecting at the time on like obviously moving all the way out to Colorado away from all of my family and all my friends and kind of carving this like hyper independent path for myself. But all of the self discoveries that I made out there, having to confront some very uncomfortable aspects of my own toxic behaviors and things like that. So, yeah, it wasn't originally intended to be like a concept album, but it turned into one pretty quickly.
Gotcha. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a really cool album. I enjoyed listening to it over the last few days as we were kind of setting all this up and whatnot. And I really enjoy your work, and I hope people give it a chance to give it a listen. And it's got a cool sound. So yeah,
Thank you so much. That means a
yeah,
lot.
absolutely. So kind of moving forward, obviously we're in a new year, 2025,
Yep.
and promoting highway hypnosis, like obviously a full project needs a little bit more promotion than just
Yep.
a standalone single. But what's kind of the plans as we head into the new year here?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time in 2024 just kind of experimenting with different content ideas.
Nice.
And now that I feel like I have a general feel of what works and what doesn't work so well, I do intend to do some more content surrounding highway hypnosis, a little bit more storytelling, kind of sharing the concept behind it and the stories behind the songs. Um, I I did a couple music videos with a friend of mine back in Denver. Um, her name is I don't know if she wants me to call her Cass, but her name is Cass. um, and when I went back to visit Denver a couple months ago, we talked about. She was like, "I really want to do your music videos," and I was like, "I actually want to do like a short film for this. Are you down to
Yeah.
collaborate with me on that?" And she was like, "Absolutely, I am." It's like, "Do you want to form an alliance with me?"
Okay. That's funny.
Absolutely, yes, I do. So that is going to be, I'm kind of working through some of the details around that. It might be a while in the making because I live in Nashville, she lives in Denver. And we're talking about like renting cars and stuff. So we obviously will need to figure out like a budget and filming dates and other logistical details like that. But I keep talking about it, and I feel like I need to actually do it instead of just like proselytizing about all these grandiose ideas I have.
Right.
And then yeah, I've got some new music in the works too. Just mostly like a few songs that didn't quite make the cut on Highway Hypnosis because I was still kind of fine tuning the songwriting, and I was like, okay, I need to just put a hard stop on demoing and writing, and like whatever doesn't make it past this deadline, it'll just go on the next project. So there's a few of those, and I'm writing some new stuff as well. Getting a little more experimental with recording techniques and stuff now that I have more access to different kinds of recording equipment. All of Highway was recorded on a Scarlett Solo.
Mm-hmm.
So that was very limiting in terms of recording capacity. I had to do everything in mono, everything like one at a time.
Yeah.
And now I have this giant hunk of like a 8 input interface, so I can mess around with recording in stereo and things like that. And I plan to showcase a little bit of that as well to draw attention to just my process, which will hopefully draw attention to past releases and then also garner some attention for future releases.
Oh yeah, for sure. Is Highway Hypnosis available is it only available digital, or do you have like hard copies of it for sale?
For right now, it's only available in digital. I do want to sell a physical format and maybe include like some download codes or something. I am just not sure if I want to just do CDs or if I also want to splurge on vinyl, but vinyl is very expensive. I really want to press vinyl, but it's just so expensive.
Honestly, because I was about to say, if like you're tossing up between CDs and vinyl or doing both or whatnot, I would just do vinyl. Like for me, and like when I go to shows and when I look at shows, is I don't even consider CDs. Like if I'm at a show and they're like, oh, we got CDs for sale, it's like I won't even consider it because it's going to sit in a bucket that I have over here. Because I get demos all the time of like music and whatnot, and it just sits in a bucket, and it's like send me a download link. Like, you know, that works a little bit better. But vinyl, when I'm at a show, that vinyl, that's a piece of art. Not that the CD isn't, but the vinyl just looks and feels better.
Yeah. And when I did my album cover, like photo shoot, I did have like also like the inside of the sleeve and the backside in mind for like designing purposes. So I think if I can swing it, I would love to splurge on vinyl. I have a lot of other merch ideas that aren't just like the album, like because it's a Highway theme. I have like, you know, I could do little keychains. I actually designed little like postcards, and I had like an idea of like selling the postcards, and there's a QR code on the back to either like a streaming link or a download link or something. I had so many like brilliant ideas for this, but they're kind of on hold right now because I haven't played out very often. I'm trying to change that this year. I'm trying to do some more full band stuff because I've done a lot of like writers rounds and like acoustic shows, and they've just gotten kind of monotonous at this point. So I want to switch it up.
Fair.
But I do get a lot of like, I do get a lot of people asking me if I want to sell vinyl. So I think that's just my sign to just do it.
Fair. You know, it's one of those things that's on the comeback, and I think it's so beneficial for a lot of musicians.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely getting out and doing more shows. I think that's a real way to go. Like I love, you know, just the idea of going to shows, and, you know, especially Nashville obviously has its core of, you know, like you could sit in Nashville and do shows all the time, but I think the overlooked thing for a lot of Nashville musicians is if you're willing to drive 3 or 4 hours, you could be in about 15 different major cities.
Yeah.
You know, and do like good weekend runs. And do something. So,
and I'm hoping to do some small, probably isolated tours because touring is very expensive. Like I love the idea of like, obviously hitting all the nearby cities. Like I did a show in Atlanta last year. That was a lot of fun. So doing that again, maybe hitting Louisville, Raleigh, Asheville, those kinds of areas. And maybe also like picking up, heading out west and doing a show in like Salt Lake, doing a show in Denver, maybe Boise or something. I really feel an itch to get on the road. I just have to, again, like with everything else, I have to figure out like the logistics of it
Yeah.
because it is very expensive.
Fair. Yeah, it really is. Are you a full-time musician now, or do you have a regular day job?
I work part-time as a barista. I was working full-time in marketing earlier this like last year.
Mm-hmm.
But once I lost my job, I kind of took that as my sign to pursue music full-time.
Mm-hmm.
And um, it's been kind of fun transitioning into that. I've had to exercise some discipline because it's very easy when you only work like 3 or 4 days out of the week to just kind of sit around and watch TV
Yeah.
or scroll on your phone or whatever. But I'm very grateful that I've gotten some projects where I'm producing stuff for my friends. Yeah. I've got my own projects that I can start producing now too. Mostly I've just been like figuring out like branding stuff because branding is so important, especially for indies. When you have full creative control over your brand and how you're perceived, this is just a really special time in my career. So I really want to maximize my time with it and my use of it. So, but I still work part-time to pay my bills because
fair, very fair. You know,
I don't think I need to go further into that.
Yeah, very fair, very fair. And then just really quick, because I don't want to keep you here too much longer. Outside of music, what do you do for fun to kind of decompress?
Love hiking, love being outdoors, especially like winter activities. I love skiing. I love hiking in the snow. I've gotten back into sewing lately.
Nice.
I've always been very thrifty with clothes, so it's been nice to get back into that as well. Also marketing. I love doing like video production and like a little bit of graphic design, although it's not really like my strongest suit. I think I excel more at like putting videos together. Yeah. That sort of thing. And then I've got a cat.
I'm surprised the cat hasn't jumped up on the desk yet. Normally that's what happens.
She's hiding. She's not.
Fair.
Sometimes she likes to jump into my lap. It's very sweet. But
fair. I love the marketing aspect because that's what I do. I work in TV and do marketing. So when you brought that up, I was like, yes, more marketing people.
More marketing people. Yeah. My friend, she's a graphic designer and she and I are working on a new logo for me. And she's like, I love that you also get this stuff because it's so much easier to talk to somebody. I think this is why like producers also like working with me is because I also produce. And so like, there's just something nice about having that common ground and like being able to speak in layman's terms. And use like, industry vocabulary and just not have to explain every 5 seconds what you mean. Absolutely.
Like branding is, especially in being a creative, the brand is the one thing you can control. And that's what people come to you for is because like, oh, hey, they can get themselves over and get themselves known.
Yep.
I want that for me. So
yeah, nice. For sure.
But yeah, so if anybody wants to check out the album, new music, social media, all that fun stuff, where's the best place to find you?
You can find me everywhere except for Twitter. I do have a Tumblr, but I haven't used it in probably a year at this point.
I was convinced Tumblr was out of business, but I guess not.
Nope. I thought they were going to pick back up after Twitter kind of disintegrated. Fair. But you can find me everywhere. It's Arily Michele with 1 L. I'm on all streaming services. I've also got a website. And if you really want to keep up with me, probably Threads is the place to go because that's where I dump my goofy thoughts.
Yes. I love Threads. Threads is so entertaining to me. So
I need like a microblogging platform in my life because I just like I come up with these like stupid little quips and sometimes people think they're funny.
Yeah. Well, Threads is cool because you get 500 characters, not the 180 that you get on Twitter or whatever. Yeah. And so I love it. So yeah. But once again, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It was really great to chat with you. Yeah. And thank you for being the first official podcast of 2025.
Starting out the new year strong. Thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch y'all later. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Live and Amplified's Indie Fusion podcast. If you'd like to support anything Live and Amplified does, please follow us on all of our social media platforms at Live, the letter N, Amplified. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, any of them, all of them, at Live, the letter N, Amplified. And if you would like to buy any official Live and Amplified merch, you can do so at our merch shop, link in the description below. Once again, thank you all. Have a great day.